Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today I would like to talk about the beatitude, "Blessed are the meek." Now, this is a request that I got something like a year ago or more. I'm really late on this. I ended up doing some research, and I'm going to do this as a scripted video because it really kind of demands it. But since it was so long, I want to do something just to have something of an answer. On this subject. And so the beatitude that I'm talking about is the one, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Now, the second half of this is not that, the translation from the Greek is not that complex. Like English maps pretty well onto that. But the beginning of it, "Makarioi hoi praeis," that's the part, "Blessed are the meek." Um, it's actually, interestingly, literally, it's "blessed the meek." Curiously, the verb to be is somewhat is just understood. Um, there's the rest of it, but that translates fairly directly. So it's that part that I want to talk about, what these words mean, and so to bring this into relation to what the entire beatitude means. And so I'll be talking about the beatitudes in general just a little bit, as necessary. As I said, the main thing will be for a scripted video that's going to take me a while to get to. So when we look at the beatitudes. Now, the first part, makarioi, what's interesting about that word, it's also translated into the English as happy, and it refers to blessings. Now, it's what should be noted, because I've seen this thing, especially in English, to take blessed or as blessed, as if it's some sort of future conditional verb, but it's not. It's an adjective. It agrees. And you can see this in the Greek, makarioi, it's an adjective. It agrees, actually, in the number and so on with hoi praeis. And that part, hoi praeis, being the humble. So makarios, it being the singular, which just flows off the tongue slightly easier for me as an English speaker. This concept of happy or blessed, it means that you have received something from God, that God has shown you favor, that God has given something to you. And you will notice that it is present. Being an adjective, it's describing the present, it's not describing the future. And so it means that um, right now, you are blessed if you're in this category of hoi praeis, the meek. So that's the first thing I'd like to draw attention to, is that it's saying that the meek are blessed. It's not setting up it's not setting up like a list of rules, and this is sort of about the beatitudes generally. It's not setting up a list of rules like, follow these rules and you will get a reward, like in a board game fashion, like when you pass Go and Monopoly you get $200. It's not that sort of thing. It's describing the nature of reality, that they're a list of things that these people are blessed, or these people are happy, and explains why. How do you know that these people are happy? This is how you know that these people are happy. This is how you know these people are blessed. Happy in like the full sense of happiness, not like, enjoying an ice cream cone. But happy is in like your being is completely fulfilled, sense of happy. Now, so we look at the meek. Next we have to look at the meek. Who are the meek? Well, unfortunately, English doesn't really use the word meek anymore. It hasn't, so far as I know, been really seriously used for hundreds of years. The one exception I can think of is you occasionally see it described, or used in character descriptions in novels. A character might be described as meek, but in that context, it seems to have shifted meaning, because it tends to go along, at least in the associations I have, it tends to go along not with things like humble or gentle, or the restraining of power, but rather with like mousy little people who don't have any power to restrain, people who can't help themselves. But that's not what meek really meant in English, and it's really not what hoi praeis means in the Greek. Because if you look up that word, you can also translate it as humble, for one thing, and for another, if you look at where it's used, it's often used of things like a king with his subjects, or there's one I remember, an example that was asking Ares to send down a gentle ray upon a person. Ares being, by the way, the god of brutal warfare. Athena was the goddess of like strategic warfare, tactics, of this sort of warfare that involves thinking. Ares was the god of just hitting things until they stop moving. Ares was not at all a nice god, and so it really sort of puts that into perspective. That here's a character, somebody asking Ares to be gentle to him. Um, the word there that we translate as meek, it refers to not to being weak at all, not to a lack of power, but rather to a restraint of power, to using power only where it is necessary. So that's something we need to get clear on what meek means in this context. That when we say blessed are the meek or happy are the meek, we're referring to people who restrain their power, people who are gentle with others, not because they have to be, but because they choose to be, that they are making their use of power proportionate to the strengths and needs of those to whom they are dealing with. Now, let's look at the other part of that. For they shall inherit the earth. Well, this is describing a nature of reality. Right? Christ is showing us that we tend to view things in the wrong way. We tend to view things upside down, and reality is very different from what we think. So he's showing us all of these people that are happy, all these people who are blessed. Now, in context, think of who are the people who would normally be thought of as blessed. Well, things like, and especially in the ancient world, they're modern analogs that I'll get to in one second. It's a little clearer in the ancient world, though. In the ancient world, people who did not restrain their power, people who showed their power, who used their power and crushed their enemies, and conquered vast amounts of land. These are the people who are clearly blessed by the gods, if you were, Roman, Greek, and so on, or by God, if you're, Hebrew. The people who dominate are the people who are clearly favored by God because they've been given this great thing. And Christ is saying, no, they're not the ones actually who are blessed. It's the people who are humble have been blessed. And here's the thing. No, the modern analog. Modern analogs, you see this a lot in sports, professional sports in particular, because professional sports are largely, though not entirely, basically a modern outlet for the desire to seek glory through violence, through warfare. Because modern warfare doesn't really allow the seeking of glory in the same way in any event. We have it's for various reasons I don't want to get into. I'm sorry, I tend to sidetrack, but to not sidetrack, for various reasons, modern sports figures are where we tend to see glory. Your best pitchers, your best quarterbacks, your best in general your best players of all positions, and in the really really big sports, your best football players in the international non-American sense of that, or soccer for us Americans, and so on. These are the people who receive the glory. These are the people who demonstrate their power. That's how they receive the glory. They demonstrate their ability to accomplish their will. And in particular within sports, because it's not a sport unless you have two sides, your ability to impose your will upon others, that you have the power to impose your will, because both sides want to win. Only one side does, the side that can impose its will upon the other. And so this is where, in the modern context, you see glory. And indeed, your football players, and kind of an amusing twist, in America, American football players make probably around the most money of professional sports players. And outside the United States, what we call soccer players and everyone else calls football players, I believe often are the best paid athletes. So I could just say football players and everyone will know what I mean here. They receive the most glory. They have riches that come along with this, and fame. They get the respect and so on that comes with societal glory. Surely these people are the happiest. But these people are not meek. These people are not humble. They're not gentle. They impose their will upon others. It's what they do for a living, is to go into a contest where two people are trying to impose their will on others and see who wins. What happens when you do this? Well, and you can see this in sports too. Again, it's a little bit clearer in warfare. What happens when two people try to impose their will on others? Well, it doesn't go so well. They don't get along. They fight each other. They do a tremendous amount of destruction in the case of warfare. Or in the case of sports, what happens? They all get injured all the time. Why? Well, because that's what happens when two powerful people are constantly, colliding with each other in some fashion. Or, even apart from that, when you are pushing your body as hard as you possibly can, and someone else is too, and you're both racing for the same ball to see who can get there slightly faster than the other, and you're pushing as hard as it is possible to push, and then stopping as fast as you can stop, you're going to injure yourself. Because when you push as hard as possible, things break. That's what happens invariably. When you push things as hard as possible, things break. You, others, someone, something is going to break when you push things as hard as you can. What does this do? It destroys. You don't have things left. What happens, and again, ancient warfare is a little bit clearer. What happens in ancient warfare? Well, you destroy a lot of things. I mean, sure, often there's stuff left over that you can steal afterwards. That was generally the point of ancient warfare. But you do a lot of destruction, and then you motivate people to come and destroy you back. The more stuff you have, the bigger target you are. The more of other people you've destroyed, the more they really want to come and get you back. And so it's never sustainable. This sort of imposition of your will upon the world through force, when this is your primary mode of interacting with people, it's never sustainable because it destroys too much. And there's never anything left. There's very little left. By contrast, those who are meek in the original sense, those who are humble, those who are gentle, they use only as much force as is necessary for the circumstance and don't try to impose their will upon the world, but rather try to work with the world, try to work with people, to talk to people, to negotiate, and to show people how things are to mutual benefit, to get along with people. Now, I don't mean that they're doormats. That's not to say that they are weak. It's just that if they don't have to use force, they don't. And what happens when you only use force when you absolutely have to? Well, one, you have stuff left over because you're not engaged in constant battle. You're not constantly getting injured. You're not constantly breaking things. There's stuff left over. If you can work with people, you can build things together. If you're constantly imposing your will by force, you're always having to break things. You're always in conflict, and so you don't have stuff left over. So why will the meek inherit the earth? It's because they don't destroy things. Their meekness, their gentleness, leaves things around for them to still have. There's also the other kind of interesting thing just even slightly more literally about this, about longevity. If you look at warriors, they don't tend to live very long lives. If you look at sports athletes, they don't tend to they don't tend to die so rapidly as people who, actually are stabbing each other for a living. But they tend to not be able to continue in their sport for all that long. I mean, it's pretty rare to have somebody who can last 10 years in their sport. That's an amazing run. 10 years, 20 years is almost unheard of. It's a phenomenally long time to not get injured and to still be really, really strong and so on. It's just very, very rare to have anything like that happen. Almost everybody gets injured and has to retire and move on. And then what do they have to show for it? Sometimes if they invested their money really well, they'll then be able to move on to something else. It does happen. It's not that it never happens. It's not that, becoming a professional football player is necessarily a bad life strategy. If you're not one of the best, you can still build up plenty of money in order to then, retire in 2 or 3 years and start a business with that doesn't rely on you being the biggest, fastest, strongest guy around. So I'm not saying that this is intrinsically always, going to destroy everything. I'm not trying to sort of go to the most extreme position. But if you look at its trend, it's always unsustainable. Whereas, how long can you run a business where you cooperate with people? And you may have to use force, that is to say, sue people or something like this at extremes if it's absolutely necessary. You may have to call the police if somebody steals something from you or what have you. But that said, in the main, you are working with people. You can keep that up for 40, 50 years. You can keep that up for a really long time, and you will build quite a lot while you do it. In fact, you can even make friends while you do it. You can make lots of friends while you do it. You can build up your social connections because you're not playing a zero-sum game. And so if you look at, in general, the structure of the world, if you use force as much as possible to impose your will, there tends to be very little left when you're done. If, by contrast, you hold yourself back, if you hold back force and go about trying to work with people if you are gentle, if you're meek, if you're among hoipraes, then you tend to build a lot more than you destroy, and there tends to be a lot more there for you to have. You also tend to have the time in which to have it. So, as I said, I'm going to do a scripted video about this because it really demands it. But that's just some, sort of initial thoughts about blessed are the meek and what this actually means, and how this is a way that we tend to misunderstand reality and what reality is actually structured as. So, anyway, I hope that was interesting. Just a reminder, I am not ordained. I don't speak with authority on the scriptures. This is, the results of my research and my thoughts so far. I offer it for what it's worth, but remember, I don't speak with authority here. And until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.